good for you. Come on. We'll think of another place. Come with me. Let's have a smoke break. Nah, it's just a normal break. Let's smoke break. Smoke break. Smoke break.
30 seconds and counting.
There were plenty of years where there were guys who would dread being drafted by the Buffalo Bills. Not anymore.
Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds.
Brandon Beane realizes they're in a window of 2 to 3 years max to get this done while the iron's still hot. And getting Von Miller into that situation was big for the Bills.
10, 9.
Oh, baby.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Great interview, guys.
I was supposed to have something pop up before me as usual, but screw it. Here I am, and here you are. What is up, Buffalo Fanatics? Z-Bot here with you, live on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on a Monday morning. And that, of course, can only mean one thing. It is the smoke break powered by BetUS. Week 2 almost in the books. We got Monday Night Football tonight between Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons taking on Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley and company and the Philadelphia Eagles. Should be an okay game. Doesn't have much to do with us. A lot had to do with us over the weekend. What an insane weekend of football. Week 2 did not disappoint. It was upset city. Week 2 of the NFL makes you realize why the NFL is king. It doesn't matter what the spread is. It doesn't matter who the favorite is, where the location of the game is, who's guaranteed to win it, whatever, fill in the blank. Any given Sunday. And this past Sunday, you saw that on full display. Upsets all over the entire league. Meanwhile, the Bills got to sit home, as we all did, and enjoy it, being 2-0 after one of the more dominating victories of the entire weekend. We got a ton to unpack, and of course, we'll get to talking a little bit about the game that will be 1 week from today in Orchard Park, Monday Night Football. The lowly, at this point, Jacksonville Jaguars, the 0-2 Jacksonville Jaguars, who I don't think people realize just how bad Jacksonville is. Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence have lost 7 of their last 8 games, which is wild because that's a team that you view as a playoff contender. Certainly for us Bills fans, the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that you view as a pain in the ass. The Bills haven't been able to beat them. Everybody else has been able to beat them. However, ever since the Bills played them in London last year, a couple games went by, and then shortly after that, as the rest of the season went on, it is sputtered out of control for Jacksonville, and they have yet to get it back on the tracks. And they take that into Buffalo, trying to get their first win of the season. I mean, you know how it is. That's going to be a desperate Jacksonville team going into Buffalo a week from today. You go 0-3, you can pretty much kiss it goodbye. 0-2 is tough enough. I'm sure you've seen the stats. I don't have the exact numbers offhand, but the odds of you making the playoffs after 0-2 crash drastically. I have no idea what it even looks like at 0-3. I mean, you basically have to have a historic turnaround to make the playoffs after 0-3. So the Bills should be getting the best crack that Jacksonville has to offer. What that is to be determined, because they played the Cleveland Browns yesterday. We're only able to muster 13 points. Did not look good at all. And then we know that they had Miami on the ropes last week, completely blew that game. So that, of course, is who the Bills have up next.
Like I said, that's Monday Night Football next week. Now, people don't seem to realize this, by the way. I don't know if you've seen this yet. I don't know what the story is. I'm sure we'll find out this week. But that's a doubleheader, which I hate. The Bills Monday Nighter a week from today is a doubleheader. The Bills game starts at 7:30. There's then another game at 8:15. Commanders at Bengals. Now, they've done this the last couple of years, but if you remember, I know at least last year, what they'll do is they'll do like a live look-in. So one of the games will be on ESPN, one of the games will be on ABC, and then throughout each game, they'll do like a live look-in. It pisses me off. If the game's going to be tight for the Bills and they start dropping into Cincinnati so I can see what the hell Jaden Daniels did against the Bengals, I'm going to lose it. So just fair warning if you didn't know that, because I don't know if that's been talked about up until this point yet. I didn't really realize it until last week that it's a doubleheader. So Bills are the first end of that. I don't know what that means, whether that's the ESPN one or the ABC one. I hope it's Joe Buck and Troy Aikman as opposed to whatever the B Squad crew is, but whatever. Signified Knows coming in with an early super chat here. Signified saying, at some point you just have to admit Trevor Lawrence isn't their guy. We thought he'd be coming out of Clemson. Odds of making the playoffs at 0-2. Okay, so Signified's got the numbers for me. I appreciate it. Love that. Odds of making the playoffs at 0-2 are 11.5% since he thinks 1990. Wow, I actually didn't even know it was that low. I knew it wasn't great. I didn't know it was that bad. Signified, if you're bored at work, let me know what it is after 0-3. Because, one, I'm just wondering. Two, if it were up to me, that's what Jacksonville will be staring in the face about a week from tomorrow morning. By the way, here it is in all its glory. I'm sure you've seen it online. The Oreo flavored Coke Zero. I mean, welcome to America. I saw it. Of course, you know me. I'm a sucker for just about everything. Had to have it. It's vanilla Coke. Spoiler alert, if you've been looking to try it and you're, going to buy it, but it's still good. If you like vanilla Coke, then you'll like it. But the thought of this thing tasting like an Oreo, no. I mean, that's not even, it's not. It doesn't. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? It's vanilla Coke. Everybody's freaking out about it. Relax. You can get vanilla Coke 365 days out of the year. Everybody's freaking out about this shit. Still good, though. I am tired saying diabetes on a Kanzi, but yeah, I mean, I know. It's when you look at it, you can't help but laugh. You can't look at that. The Oreo logo on top of the Coke logo. I mean, you can't help but laugh. It's hilarious. It's the most American thing of all time. Matty DeVito's coming in. He's saying, Z-Bot, Deion Dawkins has his own version of the Josh's Jack cereal. Yes, he does. Snow Crunch. Deion Dawkins, because I think if you look behind me, I got all of them, but the other boxes are out of the frame. But there's 4 iterations of the Josh's Jack. So we got the Color Rush, the white, the blue, the Zubas. So the way I see it, they probably just ran out of color schemes over at the Josh's Jack's headquarters. They ran out of color schemes. They're like, how do we keep this thing rolling? Deion Dawkins, baby. Snow Crunch. Now, I saw this online somewhere, so I don't forget who it was, but somebody mentioned it. Total missed opportunity. Snowflakes. I mean, I don't know if they would have gotten a cease and desist by Kellogg's, but how do you not name it Snowflakes? You had it served on a silver platter. That thing was up on the tee waiting for you to put that 500 yards into the stands. And they go with Snow Crunch. Either way, though, available starting, I think, yesterday, for sure today, at Wegmans, Deion Dawkins Snow Crunch. So if you're like me, if it's got the Bills logo on it and it's some trinket that, is new and limited edition, whatever, you'll go and get your hands on it, as I have. Or I shouldn't say I have. My mother has, because, I'm out in Connecticut. So my mom's like my merch shill. She's my go to Wegmans at 6 a.m. and get the new stuff person. And I think she said she was going today. So I guess next smoke break, you'll see the Snow Crunch behind me. I think we need to just refer to it as snowflakes. I don't know how. There's got to be a room full of people making gobs of money on the marketing team here. How do you not have one of these guys? And this is why they got to link up with BF and the boys. We would have had that like that. We would have had it like this. Hey, I got an idea. Boom. Sales through the roof. So speaking of being through the roof, the craziness of football was through the roof yesterday. Take a listen to some of these results as we sit back and recap week 2. And keep in mind, as we recap week 2, the ultimate goal of this episode, as we get through all of these games and talk about my thoughts on, and yours too, by the way, let me know in the comments because I'm very interested. The ultimate goal here, we're going to talk through these games. We're going to talk through these teams. And we're going to ask ourselves this question. Have the Buffalo Bills played some of, if not the best football through 2 weeks? I think there's certainly a debate for it. And I think the debate on the other end, in terms of saying they haven't, will shock the ever-living shit out of you, because I think the teams you could argue that have played better are teams that you would have had winning 4 games this year. The start to this year has been wicked in the best way. One, Bills are 2-0. I'll be damned if I give a rip about what everybody else is doing so long as the Bills are 2-0. But we're all football fans, of course. You love watching the chaos, especially when the Bills already have their game in the books from Thursday night. Sit back, popcorn, get your snow crunch out, right? Get your Oreo Coke Zero and tap in. That's what I did yesterday. And it was absurdity. Bills get a nice, comfortable win against the Dolphins. That game was over halfway through the second quarter. And you're going into Sunday and you're thinking, well, this slate sucks. I mean, if you're like me, this is what you were thinking. The college football slate Saturday was awful. It was awful, terrible. The best game of the day on paper was Colorado State. Brutal. And then you look at Sunday and you're like, man, this isn't all that much better. Yeah, you got Bucs Lions rematch of the divisional last year. Right? You got Bengals Chiefs. That was the game of the day. Maybe you're interested in seeing what Caleb Williams had on Sunday Night Football. Outside of that, there really wasn't a marquee game. And you're thinking it could just be blowout city all day. Couldn't have been more of the opposite. San Francisco 49ers, who just absolutely rearranged the New York Jets a week ago from today, lose to Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings, who are now 2-0. Everybody thought as soon as J.J. McCarthy went down, right, Kirk Cousins departs, and based on the way the Vikings were towards the end of the season last year, it just felt like, man, it can't be much better this year. It's going to take a while for the Vikings to get back to where they were not all that long ago. Remember, under Kirk Cousins, I think they started, 10-1, 11-1 the year that they had the game of the year, the catch of the year from Justin Jefferson against the Bills. Minnesota beats San Francisco. Now, you might say, oh, they didn't have Christian McCaffrey. Well, 1, they didn't have him against the Jets, and 2, that Mason kid is just as good as it gets. I mean, he had another 100 yards yesterday. What do you have, 150 against the Jets? It's not because Christian McCaffrey wasn't out there. Vikings were the better team on the field. Point blank, the Minnesota Vikings outplayed San Francisco for 60 minutes. It wasn't a fluke victory. You got Sam Darnold dropping absolute dimes, nukes from his own end zone against San Francisco, unarguably one of the better defenses in the league. That was a stunner. New England, not going to be nearly as bad as we thought they were. I mean, let's just get that out of the way. Good for New England to some degree. I'm not going to lie to you. I was not expecting through the first 2 weeks New England to be this competitive. Last week, huge W against the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll talk about them in a minute. I mean, that game. Talk about that in a second. But regardless, the New England Patriots, huge victory on the road last week in Cincinnati, 16-10 W. Nobody saw that coming. A near double-digit underdog in that game. And then, against Seattle, a team that I think in the NFC could certainly be vying for a playoff spot. Definitely a team more underrated than you'd think. Seattle, stout defense. I think Geno Smith on any given Sunday can burn you. Obviously, he's not the cream of the crop of the league, but definitely a guy that if he has a good outing, that Seahawks team can win any given week. New England takes him to overtime. play away from winning that one, a play away from New England being 2-0. Crazy. Carolina Panthers, I'm waiting to get the news that they're relegated to the XFL or whatever it is now, the USFL. This might be the worst football team of my life. I mean, and that's saying something because we had the 0-16 Detroit Lions. I mean, we've had some brutal teams. This team, it's not even close to competitive. They have 13 total points in the first 2 weeks. They lost by 37 last week to the Saints. And they lose 26-3 to the Chargers, who are now 2-0, one of the only 2-0 teams in the AFC alongside of the Bills. One of the few, I should say. Talk about the 2-0 team still standing in a second because, I mean, once again, it's just a reflection of how nuts this is. The true reflection of how insane this Sunday was, though, probably the New Orleans Saints in Dallas. Dallas was riding a 16-game home win streak. I don't know if that was like widely known. I really didn't even know it up until yesterday. I knew Dallas was undefeated at home last year. I didn't know they were riding a 16-game win streak at home into that one. Got absolutely murdered, destroyed by Derek Carr and company. The New Orleans Saints have 91 points through the first 2 weeks. The Bills have had back-to-back games of 31 plus, and they trail New Orleans in terms of total points through the first 2 games by 26. They scored 47 last week against the Panthers and against the number 1 total defense last year, believe it or not. Yes, that was Dallas. 44-19. I mean, just an utter dismantling. It was 21-3, I think, in the first quarter. The Saints are one of those teams that you thought going into this year, lucky you get 6, 7 wins, right? Just middle of the pack in the draft, not expecting really anything. 2-0, most total points scored in the league, beat the ever-living hell out of Dallas yesterday. Malik Willis coming in for Jordan Love off of his injury. They beat the Colts 16-10. Colts fall to 0-2. Anthony Richardson, I had felt that out of all the comparisons you've seen to Josh Allen since he's entered the league, it feels like everybody wants to say, well, he could be the next Josh Allen. Yeah, so he could take an unprecedented leap in talent. He could literally overcome math itself, right, as it was coined. He was the one guy that I saw the comparison with, just because of the athleticism and the arm talent. You saw the touchdown he had last week against the Texans. Like, it was one of the greatest throws I've ever seen in my life. The problem is he only completed 9 total throws last week, and he looked brutal against the Packers this past Sunday. I mean, Anthony Richardson was 17-34 in that game with 3 picks. The guy is an unreal talent. Similar to Josh Allen, it needs to be reeled in significantly, but I think it's far beyond what had to happen with Josh Allen. I think this is way more rough around the edges than Josh Allen ever was, and Josh Allen was rough around the edges. You see glimpses with that dude. If they can dial it in, he could be incredible. I just don't know if he can get all the way there. Now, they said the same about Josh Allen, so we'll see. But, he had to miss the majority of his rookie year last year due to injury. And, through the first couple of games here, it's just total boom or bust. Either he makes an incredible play or he just does absolutely nothing. He's got to find some sort of middle ground. But regardless, the Colts are a team I thought would be maybe contending for a playoff spot this year. Hell, they were down to week 18 last year with the Texans to win that division and make the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. I thought maybe they'd take another step with Anthony Richardson. Not looking great early on here in the year. Colts are 0-2. Cleveland gets back on the right track with Deshaun Watson and company against Jacksonville, who, of course, I said will be playing next week and have just looked mediocre to poor. I mean, let's be honest about the Jacksonville Jaguars once again here. Cleveland scored 18 points. That was good enough to win. Neither of these teams should scare you. I mean, Cleveland, I have absolutely zero respect for a variety of different reasons. But an 18-13 win is going to do nothing for me in terms of respecting Cleveland towards the playoff race here. They might be in the thick of things as they were last year with Joe Flacco. I'm not concerned about Cleveland. But to some degree, I've always been concerned about Jacksonville. They just have had the Bills' number for whatever reason, and they should be good. It makes no sense. It makes zero sense why Jacksonville is as bad as they are. I love Doug Peterson. Trevor Lawrence was one of the most highly touted prospects of my lifetime. I think ETN's a terrific back. They got plenty of studs, or I shouldn't say studs, but they got plenty of talent, rather, on that offense. I mean, the majority of these guys playing receiver would start for the Bills, like today. Gabe Davis, of course, as we know, started pretty much his whole career until he left. But you'd have to imagine, I mean, Brian Thomas starts on the Bills, right? Gabe Davis had started on the Bills. Christian Kirk would probably start on the Bills right now. They have decent talent on the wide receivers side of things, plus Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence, who you're just waiting for it to happen. And I think the conversation needs to be had. It's so funny. He doesn't even get talked about anymore. Trevor Lawrence doesn't even get discussed anymore. It's not even that it's like because he's bad. He's just very forgettable. It's become very forgettable, as are the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're just so forgettable. Trevor Lawrence yesterday was 14 of 30. No touchdowns, no picks. 14 of 30, 13 points. He brings that into Buffalo Monday night. They're going to get waxed. Now, he seems to save his best work for the Bills, or at least good enough work to get things done. But in the past 2 weeks, the Jaguars have put together a 17-point performance and a 13-point performance, both resulting in losses. You're not going to be very successful in this league if in back-to-back weeks your defense holds the Dolphins to 20 points and the Browns to 18 points, and you lose both of those games. That's unacceptable. You cannot lose back-to-back games where your defense, in a league where you got the Saints pushing 100 points in the first 2 weeks, you hold two teams to 20 or less in back-to-back weeks, two playoff teams, by the way, two playoff teams from last year. You hold both those teams to 20 or less, you lose both. That's pitiful. And that's 100% because of this offense. Trevor Lawrence in back-to-back weeks, it is bad. It's not just mediocre. It is bad. Against the Dolphins, 12 of 21 for $162. So he's got 12 completions in that one. And you know, everything, of course, is circumstantial. Josh Allen has had a similar stat line against the Dolphins because it wasn't necessary to do anything else. In a game against the Dolphins where you're fighting for your life towards the end, you would hope the numbers would reflect that. Josh Allen's numbers have been, I mean, they were really good against Arizona, but it was minimal because there was so much else happening. James Cook stepping up, the defense stepping up. There's a difference. When you're putting up 17 points and 13 points, the numbers matter. When the Bills are putting up 34 and 31, you have way more room to say, yeah, of course Josh Allen only completed 12 balls because James Cook had 3 touchdowns. Defense had a touchdown. Defense was giving him the ball at midfield or better the whole night, right? So in week 1, Trevor Lawrence, 12 of 21, so barely eclipsing a 50% completion percentage, 162 and a score. And then against the Browns, less than a 50% completion percentage, 220 yards and 0 scores. So he's got 1 touchdown on the year for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's pushing a 50% completion percentage with pretty pedestrian yards through the air. That's who the Bills are going up against this upcoming Monday. The strong suit for this Jacksonville team clearly is their defense. And they have given the Bills fits. Their Josh Allen has been great against these Bills. Great. Their defense overall really has been terrific against these Bills. The Bills have a tough time putting up points against Jacksonville every time they've played them. But you're not going to hold the Bills to 18, 20 points, in my opinion. This new style of Bills, even if you do, I don't see how the offense is going to overcome it the way that they've been playing here. 13 points and 17 points with as pedestrian numbers as Trevor Lawrence is putting up. Plus, they're not running the ball particularly great either. You just have to wonder how much the the desperation factor kicks in for Buffalo, or excuse me, for Jacksonville going into that game. You go to 0-3, the season's essentially over. And this is the crazy thing. It's not just desperation in terms of avoiding 0-3. There is so much more on the line, in my opinion, in Jacksonville. Doug Peterson's job very well could be on the line. Very well. And then, there needs to start being a significant conversation about Trevor Lawrence. I know the whole Tua situation is very much up in the air. Of course, it's come out now that he's going to come back and play at some point. I don't think that shocks anybody because, of course, that's what he wants to do. Whether it's the right decision or not, that's up to your interpretation of it, but it's his decision nonetheless. But regardless of what he decides to do or what happens moving forward here, they paid him. The Dolphins paid him. Trevor Lawrence hasn't gotten paid. And I don't know. I don't know what I would value him as. I mean, wait, no, I'm bugging out. I forgot he did get paid. Wow, that makes this even worse. I was going into this under the impression that he still. No, I'm wrong on that. Man, so it's even worse for Jacksonville than I thought, to be honest. I did not realize. I guess it's because everybody else was after him. He signed back in June. So you had all these major deals after him. Yeah. Completely forgot about this. So, oh boy, I'll tell you, it's just one more of these examples of all of these teams stacking up contracts that just are going to put them in purgatory for what feels like the longest time. You got Miami, you got the Giants, you got Jacksonville here. I think it's the worst spot in the NFL to be. I would much rather be in a spot, I don't know, like New England or Carolina, who will probably inevitably move off of Bryce Young. I would much rather be in that spot than this type of spot because you're never going to, whatever this is, like, to me, Trevor Lawrence, he's never just going to flip it on and become a Super Bowl quarterback to me. What are we going into here? Right? Well, I mean, he's already got his second contract. I mean, goes to show you how long it's been because I already forgot. But he was drafted when Tua was drafted. I think that was the 2020 draft. So this is his fifth year, right? Yeah. You either got it or you don't by then. And we know Tua doesn't, and we know that Trevor Lawrence doesn't. If anything, Tua's had the more successful career. And I think everybody in Miami was freaking out at the time, including me, in terms of like, wow, what are you doing? As far as like trying to pin those. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence was the number one overall pick. Miami didn't have a choice. But for the longest time, you were hearing, whatever. Tua's just as good. Tua's just as good. And I was always under the impression of not even close. I mean, it's just not even close. It's not just close. Tua is the better quarterback. And you know my thoughts on Tua. Up until this point, Tua's been the better quarterback. And I've always been on record saying I would take Trevor Lawrence over Tua in a heartbeat. That argument's getting less and less easy to make. But the reality of the situation is you take either one, it's not a great choice. Both those quarterbacks right now and both their contracts are not looking good at all. So I can't believe I forgot that he signed that extension, by the way. June. 5-year, $275 million deal. And it's a 5-year contract. Good luck to him. It just feels like the league nowadays is so crazy. This is why Daniel Jones gets paid. You beat the Vikings in the playoffs. Oh, we got to pay him. I mean, clearly he's good enough to win us a playoff game. Jacksonville comes from behind against the Brandon Staley-led Chargers. They win a playoff game. Oh, I guess we got to pay Trevor Lawrence. Tua has Tyreek Hill win Offensive Player of the Year. Oh, I guess we got to pay him now. How else are we going to run this offense? I don't know. 4-4-5 block coming in based on what? Lawrence has won a playoff game. I mean, yeah, but He won one playoff game against maybe one of the worst head coaches in recent memory in Brandon Staley, one of the most inept coaches in recent memory in Brandon Staley. Absolutely. The Chargers, for lack of a better term, shit themselves in that wild card game. He's got one playoff win. It was in that moment. That's it. If you're talking about in terms of success, outside of one playoff win, Tua has been the more successful quarterback, at least to me. But regardless, I don't think it's saying much. Saying Tua has been the better quarterback up until now is not saying a whole hell of a lot. Because in reality, they both have not met the expectations of the fan base. Certainly Trevor Lawrence, though. You got to remember that, too. The bar for Tua was high, but the bar for Trevor Lawrence, I mean, it was beyond, it was in another stratosphere, another galaxy. Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be the next Manning, the next Andrew Luck, the next Elway. He's been a middle-of-the-pack quarterback at best, and right now he's not even looking like that. So if you take into consideration the fact that I think Tua has actually overcome, he's probably overplayed the expectations, and I know he's had the better situation, certainly in terms of resources around him. But you can't tell me that Trevor Lawrence hasn't had that himself. I just listed off to you. He's had guys around him, and I think Doug Peterson's a hell of a coach. You're right off the year with Urban Meyer. That was a throwaway year, but, you know, Tua would argue that he had a throwaway year as well with Brian Flores. Remember when he was getting benched every other game for Ryan Fitzpatrick? So who knows? And I saw you mention this too. You mentioned Herbert. Yeah, he's another one. Herbert, to me, like that's why I don't understand how the Chargers have not been able to win a playoff game or do much of anything with him. I think a lot of it had to do with Brandon Staley, and I think Harbaugh is going to resurrect this franchise. You're already seeing a good start for them. They're 2-0 right now. Now, I know that they've only played the Raiders and the Panthers. It's not like they've played the gauntlet of the league here, but still 2-0, and their defense looks damn good. They're running the ball really well, and 2-0 is 2-0. I know I just said it's only the Raiders. That's what the Baltimore Ravens were saying. Let's talk about them. Baltimore, what can you say about Baltimore? Did you know that now, I think since 1990, John Harbaugh has the most blown games in the last 30 years. Nobody's blown more games in the second half, fourth quarter, than John Harbaugh. It's not only that. In the last 5 years, so all 5 years were with Lamar. In the last 5 years, the Baltimore Ravens have lost, how many was it? They've lost, I think, 10 games in the fourth quarter where they had at least a score lead. Something like that. It might even be worse than that. Don't you remember when they had that massive lead against the Dolphins and they came back? It's something crazy. Let me find that. The Ravens are becoming one of those teams that are just, they're almost closer to Miami than they are to Kansas City. Let me get the exact number here. Here we go. So here's the stat. 4 times in the Jackson era with Lamar playing, the Ravens have blown fourth quarter leads of at least a double digit. That's the stat. So in Lamar's time in Baltimore, that team has blown 4 games with him starting, 4 games where in the fourth quarter, they had a double-digit lead. That might not seem like a whole lot, 4 games. That is abysmal. A double-digit lead in the fourth quarter with the 2-time MVP, that shouldn't even have a 1 next to that stat, and it's 4. They had a double-digit lead in their home opener yesterday against Gardner Minshew and the Las Vegas Raiders, who going into the year, like literally 3 weeks ago, did you even know who their starting quarterback was going to be? I mean, honest to God, it was a toss-up between Gardner Minshew, and I love Gardner Minshew, but I wouldn't want him as my starting quarterback because I know for a fact that my team is not going to be vying for much. He's like Ryan Fitzpatrick to me. How do you not love Gardner Minshew? But if you got Gardner Minshew in or you got Ryan Fitzpatrick in, you know you're not going to be competing at the top of the league. Baltimore is competing at the top of the league. And in your home opener, you blow a double-digit lead to the Raiders? Baltimore has now become the poster child for this. And when you really think about the Baltimore Ravens, are they closer to the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins of the world than they are the Bills and the Chiefs of the world? John asked us coming in. This is the one I was thinking of. Thank you, John. I think this is the one I saw because I knew there was a 10 losses. He has 10 losses in the fourth quarter while the next closest is 6. So I believe that this stat was under Lamar, they have 10 losses where they have at least a score lead, I believe it was, or at least whatever the hell, like a lead in the fourth quarter. Blown lead. 10 blown leads in the fourth quarter. Nearly half of those are double digit. And when we think about Baltimore, I know certainly me, you think of one of the best teams in the league, one of the toughest outs in the league, a team you really don't want to see. But the more you get down to it, I know that they win 13 games consistently. They're right up there last year, right in the AFC Championship. Lamar, 2 MVPs. You think about Baltimore. I mean, in my lifetime, Baltimore has been good pretty much the entirety of it. One of the most well-run franchises in the league. And with Lamar, even more so. But when it comes down to actually getting it done here, in a variety of ways, to me, they are far more similar to the more fraudulent teams in the league like the Dolphins and the Cowboys than they are to the Niners, the Chiefs. You say what you want. The Bills have, I think, more than double the playoff wins that Lamar has in his time with Baltimore. They just haven't been competing like that in the big moments. And beyond that, beyond the big moments, it's moments like these that are unprecedented that nobody else is doing. This loss yesterday was eye-opening to me. The Baltimore Ravens are now 0-2. The Ravens are now 0-2. They are a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and a toe from Isaiah Likely away from being 2-0. So you can't write them off. But the fact that they are currently 0-2 with the MVP at quarterback coming into a year where it looked like they were going to be even better with Derrick Henry is stunning to me. Especially when you factor in a 10-point lead at the fourth quarter mark against the Las Vegas Raiders. A stunning loss yesterday. Baltimore was, I think, a 9-point favorite in that game. At home, too, by the way. At home. That was such a bad loss for Baltimore, and just one more notch in the cap for the Bills with a Sunday off. Buccaneers got it done against the Lions. Big W for Baker Mayfield and the boys. They're now 2-0 as well. They look great. Detroit looked phenomenal against the Rams. You're thinking that they are probably one of the front runners for the NFC Championship at the least, Super Bowl at the best. Did not look good against the Bucs. Only 16 points. They lose that one, so the Bucs are probably a shocking 2-0. How much better do you feel today about the Buffalo Bills' victory over the Arizona Cardinals after what you saw be put on display yesterday by those Cardinals against the LA Rams? My God. You're thinking to yourself the other day, yeah, 34 points. Bills played terrific in the second half, but man, that first half, it wasn't great. They went down 17-3. They really had to earn that W. They really had to get their shit together quick in the second half in order to win that one. How good is Arizona? And because of that, how good is Buffalo? How much stake can we put into what Buffalo did? Because let's be honest, Arizona won 4 games last year, and I just don't know how much I can take away from what the Bills did in that game because of that. Arizona beat the LA Rams 41-10. James Conner had 21 carries for 122 yards and a touchdown, and Kyler Murray looked like an MVP caliber quarterback. Kyler Murray went 17 of 21 for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. And here's the biggest kicker of them all. You all know the stat line that Marvin Harrison Jr. had against the Bills in week 1 catch for 4 yards. He had 4 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. I believe the majority of all of that stat line came in the first quarter. I think he had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter alone. So you're thinking to yourself, yeah, okay, the Bills, they don't cover the spread. They win by 6. They allow 28 points. But let's really get back to what happened there. Let's get back to what happened. The Bills, in reality, really won that game. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that the kick return didn't count, but the kick return's a fluke play. Through 2 weeks, that kick return is still the lone kick return of the year thus far. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. A kick return for a touchdown is one of the rarest scoring plays in the game. The Bills were up 31-20 at that point, and the way that the Cardinals were playing on offense, I would not have expected the score to change at all for the Cardinals, if not for that touchdown. They didn't score a single offensive point. Take that back. They scored a field goal in the second half, I believe, right? The Cardinals did. Yeah. They scored a field goal in the fourth quarter. So the Cardinals scored 3 points in the second half against the Bills. It was 31-20 or 31-20 before that kick return. So that score to me is a bit skewed. I think in the second half, the Bills beat the Cardinals more than a 34-28 victory indicates. And as John's coming in here and saying correctly, it was 24-3 in the second half. Yes, I know they were up 17-3 in the first half, but we're talking about the first half of the first game. This Bills offense, as a unit with Josh Allen, had not played a single snap together outside of 3 preseason snaps? Doesn't even count. The amount of new on this team, not only offensively, but defensively as well, you really saw that on display defensively, in my opinion, in the beginning of that game. The Bills were getting walked on by Kyler Murray. And then as soon as they got the blood flowing, as soon as they got loose, it was done. 24-3 in the second half. Offense couldn't be stopped. Defense was dominating. Marvin Harrison Jr., 1 catch for 4 yards. James Conner's stat line completely went away after a beginning of a game where I thought he was going to have a monster performance. And Kyler Murray held under 170 yards and didn't do much of anything. Ray, you're right. It was 17-10 at the half, but it was 17-3 before the half. They were up by 14. So here's the moral of the story here. You can sit and argue, oh, that win wasn't all that impressive, as many were, of course, because for whatever reason, this is insane to me, but somewhat true. And maybe it's just based on the bias that we have of following stuff that's more leaning towards the Bills and the rest of the league. But didn't it feel to you like the Bills got a bit more criticism for lying too much on Josh Allen and barely beating the Cardinals than the Bengals got for actually losing at home to New England and scoring 10 points? That's how it felt to me. Felt like the Bills were getting scrutinized more because, it's the Josh Allen show. It's so unreliable. It's not sustainable. You simply cannot sustain him putting the superhero cape on and winning your games, especially when you're playing against the Arizona Cardinals. That's all you heard all week. I didn't hear a whole hell of a lot about the Bengals putting up a 10 spot against the Patriots team whose over-under for the win total is 4.5 at home. You sit here today, you feel at least twice as good, if not more, about that W against the Cardinals. I told you going into that game. I told you after that game. The Cardinals are not a team to joke around with. I think that team's got some serious potential. You saw it against the Bills. You saw it against the Rams. The other argument here is going to be, well, the Rams are a shell of themselves. They're the most injured team in the league. That is a truth. It's a truth. The Rams have lost pretty much their entire offensive line. They lost Puka Nacua. Of course, Aaron Donald retired, so that's a whole other thing. They got to replace him. And they've lost a significant amount of personnel on the defensive side of things as well. Here's my counter. Have you seen the Bills roster? I mean, I know it's pretty much it's like looking at a hospital sheet for LA. I get that. But I mean, it's not 100 yards down the road for the Bills in terms of difference here. Bills are banged up, defensively banged up. And they held Marvin Harrison Jr. to a catch for 4 yards. So the argument's going to be, well, the Rams are just way too injured. That's why they went out there and did what they did against them. We got DeMar Hamlin starting at safety. You got Cam Lewis starting back there. You got Jamarcus Ingram starting back there, right? You don't even know what the situation is going to be at linebacker at this point. You spare me with the fact that the Rams are more banged up. I know that they are, but it's not like the Bills were trotting out there with a fully healthy, loaded roster with what they did defensively to the Cardinals in the second half. Plus, not even a week ago, with that banged up roster, the Rams took the Lions to overtime. I feel terrific today about what I saw from the Cardinals on display on that Sunday and how I correlate that back to what I saw from the Bills against this same Cardinals team. You also factor in what the Bills did to follow that up against the Dolphins. This is where I start to get the juices flowing here about the Bills playing some of the best football in the league early on here. Because when you're factoring in the Cardinals beating the Rams by 31, I don't care how banged up you are. These are still NFL players. A 31-point margin of victory is insane. I don't care who you're playing. That's a crazy margin of victory. And you still have Matt Stafford. You still have Kyron Williams, who was probably one of, if not the best running back in the league last year. You still have Cooper Kupp, one of, if not the best receiver in the NFL on any given Sunday. So it's not like they were playing the Panthers out there. The Rams are still a team because of Matt Stafford, because of Kyron Williams and Cooper Kupp, because of Sean McVay. They're not a 41-10 loss type team. So it might just possibly be the fact that the Cardinals are a lot better than people thought they were going to be. Yeah, you factor in the losses with, or the injuries with the Rams, certainly. Of course. But you can't not feel more impressed about what the Bills have done thus far after seeing what the Cardinals did against the Rams. I mean, Kyler Murray had a perfect passer rating against the Rams. James Conner, 21 for 122, and of course the Marvin Harrison Jr. stat line. Plus, they got Trey McBride involved heavily with 6 catches and 67 yards. He didn't do anything against the Bills. Just to give you a quick comparison in terms of those stats compared to what they did against the Bills, the leading receiver for the Cardinals against the Bills was Greg Dortch, 6 catches for 47 yards. Trey McBride had 30 yards. James Conner had 50 yards on nearly as many carries as he had against the Rams. They just about doubled up every stat line they had against the Bills, against the Rams this past Sunday. Kyler Murray had only 4 more completions. Or excuse me, let me double check this. So Kyler Murray had 4 more completions against the Bills than he did against the Rams. He was 17-21 against the Rams. He had 21 completions against the Bills. With those 21 completions, he had 162 yards and 1 touchdown. In the 17 completions against the Rams, he had 266 yards and 3 touchdowns. Night and day performance with nearly a similar approach to the game. Because James Conner against the Bills had 16 carries, I believe, for 50 yards. He had 21 carries against the Cardinals for 122 yards. Night and day. You can't help but feel that much more impressed about the Buffalo Bills through the first 2 weeks after what you saw the Cardinals do against the Rams, injuries included. The Rams and the Cardinals going into that game yesterday was an even spread. It was a pick'em game. So it wasn't like the Rams were expected to go in there and blow them out, but they've done nothing but that under Sean McVay against the Cardinals. They've owned the Cardinals, regardless of who's been out there, really. And regardless of the injuries, you cannot tell me that was supposed to be a 31-point drubbing. It was a pick'em. Cardinals looked great, and I think it adds more fuel to the fire that the Bills win against the Cardinals was more impressive than originally met the eye. The Pittsburgh Steelers, once again, are somehow 2-0. I don't know who Mike Tomlin sold his soul to. I don't understand how this team does it. I mean, I get you're going up against Bo Nix, who looked abysmal. 20 of 35, 246 yards and 2 picks. A rookie quarterback against a Mike Tomlin defense. Mike Tomlin essentially has replaced Bill Belichick in that regard now that he's no longer coaching in the league in terms of just shutting guys down who have no experience. You're never going to succeed against Mike Tomlin as a rookie. I get that. Nobody was expecting that. But 6 points. Can't get in the end zone once. A field goal per half. And the killer here is in 2 weeks, I mean, it's insane. The Steelers make no sense. In 2 weeks, the Steelers have more wins than they do touchdowns. The Steelers have 1 touchdown in 2 weeks of play. They're 2-0. Justin Fields thrown into the starting role like 2 days before week 1 because of the whole time it was supposed to be Russell Wilson. All of a sudden, he wasn't ready to go. They go with Justin Fields. They roll with him again this past week. They're 2-0. C-Dot saying, I think Bo Nix will be good. I do too. I've liked what I've seen as far as the eye test is concerned. Like I just said, he was never going to succeed yesterday. It was terrible. If you watched him yesterday, it looked like exactly what I guess you would assume it would look like against the Mike Tomlin defense with J.J. Watt or T.J. Watt running it down. I love the way he moves, and he's got a great ball. I think once he gets more refined, especially with Sean Payton coaching him, Bo Nix certainly to me looks like somebody that can definitely succeed in this league. He just doesn't he look the part? He's really athletic, moves around real well, extends the pocket real well. He can run. I love the look of his ball. And I just feel like he's got attributes that seem, you can tell a lot just by watching a guy. I mean, you watch Bryce Young, regardless of how bad the Panthers are, and it just does not look like an NFL quarterback. He's too small. He doesn't process things nearly quick enough. It just doesn't look like it works. You watch Will Levis. That is not a recipe for success in the NFL. Will Levis is playing football like every game is a game at recess. It just doesn't work. What you see from Bo Nix, to me, just based on the visuals, looks like a guy that definitely can have success in this league. But like I said, against Mike Tomlin, him, Caleb Williams, who against a really good Houston Texans defense last night couldn't do anything. That's just the nature of the beast when you are a rookie quarterback going up against stout defensive talent, and nobody better at that than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So a 6-point finish yesterday for the Denver Broncos against the Steelers. The Steelers go in back-to-back weeks with 18 points and 13 points and somehow finish that 2-game stint 2-0. Justin Fields, 13 of 20 for 100 and... Dude, the Steelers are hilarious. They're hilarious. I couldn't have more respect for the Steelers. I have a ton of respect for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. How could you not? You score 13 points. Your quarterback goes 13 to 20 for $117. Kyler Murray yesterday against the Rams had 117 yards on the first 2 drives. Right? 13 to 20 for 117 yards. 251 total offensive yards. 13 to 6. Get out of there with a win. Incredible. Steelers are 2-0. All right, let's talk about the game of the day. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Once again, Patty Mahomes, Andy Reid, the Chiefs, they get that whistle, don't they? It's why everybody hates them. It's why they're so good. It's not that getting a whistle makes you good. It's the fear factor that they instill in you that makes them the best team in the league. Because when you're watching that end to the game, you are more willing, like if you had a meter, right? 0 being the lowest in confidence, 100 being the highest in confidence. When the Chiefs have the ball with like, it's, what is it? 3rd and 16, was it? 4th and 16 that it would then turn into, or no, it was 3rd and long. They got it. And then there was a holding call. Then it was 3rd and even longer. They didn't get it. And then it was 4th and 16 or whatever. They take multiple timeouts in between. I believe the Chiefs took a timeout and then the Bengals took a timeout. So there's a ton of time in the interim here to think about what's going to happen next. If you go back to that meter I was just mentioning, with 0 being the least confident and 100 being the most confident, you are far more towards the 100 in terms of them getting a 4th and 16 than you are towards the 0. You cannot say that about, you really can't say that about any other team in the league. The funny thing is, it's the exact same thing you would have said about the New England Patriots under Tom Brady. It's not just that they're good, that they also have the vibe. That is a thing. I don't know how to describe it to you. They just have the it. And that it, for whatever reason, results in everything always seemingly going their way. Because as Signified Nose is saying here, that was clearly a DPI. It was. Go back and watch it. Forget exactly the D-back and the receiver in on it. It might have been Rashee Rice who the target was. What does it matter? The guy got there like a full half second before the ball was even able to be caught and nailed him right in the back. Does it absolutely suck that it comes down to the last second there? Absolutely. Totally blows. Does it suck that it benefits the Chiefs? It totally does. But once again, does it shock you? Totally not. Absolutely not. Before we keep talking about that, by the way, I meant to bring this up a couple of minutes ago when we were talking about the Jaguars, because you're watching that game and you see the Bengals fall to 0-2. Right? You see the Bengals fall to 0-2. You see the Chiefs go to 2-0, and you're wondering when the separation is going to start occurring here. And that's why I think there's such a desperation for the Jacksonville Jaguars to get a win this upcoming week. And that's why I think the Bills getting to 3-0 would be absolutely massive. This just made me think of it, by the way. Right now on BetUS, this line has swung significantly. Significantly. Yesterday, the Buffalo Bills were a 3.5-point favorite against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are now currently on BetUS a 5.5-point favorite to beat Jacksonville. This number has moved dramatically. A ton of money coming in on Buffalo. Over-under is 45. and the Bills are favored at home to win by nearly a touchdown. The reason I just thought of this real quick is I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I couldn't believe how much this moved. It's nearly doubled since yesterday. I think a couple of things are factored in on this. One, the way that the Bills looked this past week in terms of how impressive that they were. And then two, how unimpressive Jacksonville was. This is a major spread between a team that's supposed to be a playoff team and a team in the Bills who, coming into this year, I think many would have argued the Jacksonville Jaguars would be the better team up until this point. I think a lot of people thought that Jacksonville was going to take that next step and the Bills were going to take that backward step. Crazy. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick. Also, by the way, if you want to get in on that, 150% sign-up bonus, up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits using the promo code YouTube150. Even at -5.5, I don't hate it. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I just wanted to bring that up real quick because that is a crazy move in that line. Back to the Chiefs and the Bengals game, though. So what I was getting at is in terms of this aura that the Chiefs have, it's very hard to describe, but yesterday you see it once again. It is in that moment when you are so convinced that something's going to happen for these guys that it doesn't even shock you when it does. If that happens in any other game yesterday, it might stick out more. Because it happened for the Chiefs, it just doesn't. But the reality is, oftentimes the Chiefs get criticized for them getting the lucky whistle or this and that. But as Signified said in here earlier, it absolutely was a defensive pass interference. And here's what I also think factors into that aura, that vibe that they give that I think makes them that much tougher to beat. I think that there's a clear overcompensation when you're playing against the Chiefs in moments like that result in the team shooting themselves in the foot while the Chiefs never do. It's in those moments where you're like, I know it's the Chiefs. We got them on the ropes. It's down to the last play. I got to make a play, and it results in a bonehead play. It happens all the time. All the time. You got the Chiefs. Because the Chiefs play close games. The Chiefs don't blow people out very frequently at all. They often are in close games no matter who they're playing. I believe Patrick Mahomes against the spread in terms of being larger than a 3-point favorite. Like he's got a losing record against the spread when he's favored by more than 3 points, meaning they don't really blow anybody out with Mahomes. Now, of course, like every other team, they have their occasional blowout. Everybody does. But more or less, the Chiefs play games down to the wire. And when it gets down to these moments against really good teams like the Bengals or whoever else, the Bills, of course. I mean, shit. Right? The Ravens last week. It all comes down to the point I've made about the Chiefs forever. They make the one play that you don't. Or you make the boneheaded play that they don't. And even when they do make boneheaded plays, you make one additional one. Chiefs did not play that great yesterday. Mahomes did not play good. Mahomes was not good yesterday at all. Threw a couple of terrible picks. Even crazier, the second pick he had, he got bailed out. He threw the pick on that drive. There was a holding call against whoever was defending Travis Kelce. They held Kelce. He threw another pick a couple of plays later. This Chiefs team is still defensive led, by the way. That's what makes them so tough. This Chiefs team, because just right to that example, Mahomes throws, it was an incredible interception. It was a terrible throw, but it doesn't make the interception any less remarkable. It was a one-handed interception that will probably end up being a top 10 play of the year. This year, even though we're already only 2 weeks in. Cam Taylor-Britt with the interception. It was remarkable. It was like an OBJ type pick, but the throw was awful. And Mahomes had already gotten bailed out. Here's Mahomes' stat line yesterday. I mean, once again, it's just Mahomes was 18-25 for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Did you know that since the beginning of last season, I believe both Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes have 18 interceptions each? I understand we don't compare the two because it's not worth comparing. Mahomes is the better quarterback with far more accolades. But fair is fair. Josh Allen being labeled as this turnover king, while Mahomes has been on a similar rip as him, is crazy to me. Through the first couple of weeks here, he's had a couple of pretty awful throws. He had a pick against the Ravens, and he's got 2 yesterday. But the thing is that they still just find a way, regardless. He's able to get away with it. I mean, the stat line yesterday, beyond pedestrian for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, in fact, it's not even that. 18 to 25, 151 yards. I know you got the 2 touchdowns, of course, but the 2 picks to go along with it. 25 attempts for 151 yards. I mean, you're averaging about 6 yards an attempt there. Isaiah Pacheco, he had 19 carries for 90 yards. The significant note in that is that resulted in him suffering a pretty bad injury. This is going to be a big blow for the Chiefs, because it seems like the emphasis for them, kind of similar to what the Bills have been doing, they like running the ball more than they ever have. And they like doing so because they're relying on their defense to hold up their end of the bargain. And the better you run the ball, I think the more it benefits the ability for the defense to coincide with the time of possession battle, this and that, and get you the W. But Isaiah Pacheco is going to go on IR. He's going to miss at least 4 weeks. Apparently, he was in a boot after the game and on crutches. Their next running back is, I don't even know. Samaje Perine, I think it is their backup running back. The Chiefs through the first 2 weeks have not looked great, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing that happened last year. 2-0 regardless. Last year, the Chiefs, for the majority of the regular season, did not look great at all. Still somehow found a way to not only get into the playoffs, despite not being the team that had the home field advantage like they've had ever since Mahomes has been the quarterback, but winning every single one of those games on the road against probably the toughest slate of teams to date. Playing Miami, who at the time had, you have the offensive player of the year, and you had that offense that was putting up historic numbers. Then, of course, the Bills on the road and the Ravens on the road to just then beat the Niners, of course. It was remarkable. But this is why it's so hard for me to take anything away from this other than the fact that, they won despite whatever that they did. I mean, despite the fact that Mahomes didn't look great, he's got 3 interceptions on the year, 2 in that game yesterday. It doesn't matter. 2-0, and as long as they get to where they're trying to get to, of course, which is the playoffs like all of us, none of this is going to matter. But I just found it crazy that yesterday, despite that stat line, they still were able to get a victory out of that. The Bengals are not. Joe Burrow is now 1-7 in his career through the first 2 weeks of football in each year. So if you combine all of Joe Burrow's years that he's been in the league and take the first 2 weeks of each of them, he is now 1-7. So this is another one where it's tough to read into this game here because the Chiefs don't look great. Mahomes doesn't look great. Yes, they get the W, but a lot of people are like, whatever, they got it off of a pass interference. Regardless, though, I'll say this, by the way, just speaking of which, you still have to hit the field goal, by the way. And Harrison Butker, that's why it matters so much, having one of the best kickers in the league right there. Did you notice the Chiefs barely even tried to move the ball once they got into field goal position? That's how confident they are in Harrison Butker hitting a 50-plus yarder at the buzzer to win the ballgame. Having a kicker like that is, in those situations, is the equivalent of having a top 5 quarterback. in those situations. You know the vibe you have, the feeling you have about a team simply based on their quarterback? The Chiefs, of course, the Bills. Whenever you play the Ravens, your first focal point in terms of the scouting department or the scouting chart, how the hell are we going to defend this team? Lamar Jackson, Burrow and the Bengals. You know what I'm talking about. If those quarterbacks are playing, you know the vibe. If they're not, it completely changes the ballgame. When it comes down to those moments, the feeling you have with one of the better quarterbacks on your side, or the feeling you have going up against one of the better quarterbacks, is exactly the feeling you have in a moment like that when either you have the best kicker or you're going up against the best kicker. You know, for example, it's like last year when the Bills were playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Don't you remember when that game went to overtime? And Jake Elliott, in the pouring ass rain, kicks a damn near 60-yard field goal and drills it. And you just you had a feeling going into that kick, he's going to make it. He's one of the better kickers in the league. And I think we all know if it were in the Bills situation, you don't have that feeling. You don't have that feeling of confidence. Yesterday, you could see the confidence simply based on how the Chiefs executed that final drive. They were just setting it up for him to kick it. They barely tried to get an additional yard to make it even easier for him. That's how confident they are. So I know it's easy to say, well, they got gifted it by the refs. You still have to have the guy to nail a 53-yarder in a clutch situation like that. And Harrison Butker is as good as it gets in that department. Nailed it. And it was defensive pass interference. And, not for nothing, too, I just thought the Bengals, it's the Jamar Chase meltdown yesterday over begging for a flag that was not at all a flag. I don't know what the hell he was bitching about. That completely ruined their drive. The Bengals had the ball. God knows how the game ends up finishing out if they get a first down on that drive and continue it. Either ended up going down and scoring, milking more clock, whatever. Jamar Chase has an absolute episode about begging for what I think was, what did he want? A face mask or a hip drop tackle, which, by the way, they're not going to call the hip drop. Have you not noticed? They're not going to call it. The fact that they even implemented that rule to begin with is insane to me. No one knows what the hell a hip drop tackle is. Yeah, you know what it is after somebody breaks it down for you in slow motion on a replay. These refs are never going to throw the flag on this. They haven't thrown one through the first 2 weeks. You might see 2 or 3 max the rest of the year, if that. They're not going to call it. They're just not going to call it. It's kind of like, remember back when they were allowed you to review pass interference and they never once overturned it? Not once. It was never overturned, and they got rid of it. This rule implementation was done because of the injuries last year to Nick Chubb and Mark Andrews, and the NFL felt like they had to get ahead of it, right? They had to make a statement based on these hits that were causing these injuries. They're still occurring, and the flag is not being thrown. In real time, it's real tough to see. I don't think the refs, by definition, know exactly what the hell the rule is. I don't know if anybody really knows what the hell the rule is, unless you got somebody walking you through it on a slow motion, and we know that that's not how the game is played. That's not how it's going to be enforced, because it can't be. So whatever, he's bitching about that. I think that's what he wanted, or a horse collar or a face mask, some sort of personal foul, and he had an absolute episode. How rare is it? It's not like the NBA where you get teed up. The guys get teed up all the time and shit. Draymond Green gets kicked out of a game once a week. It's very rare in the NFL to get a personal foul call for bitching at the ref. I mean, how many times have you seen a coach just obliterate a ref on the sideline over a call or something? How many times do you see guys just freaking out? That's how bad it was. He was going nuclear on that referee. They threw a 15-yard personal foul on him. It ruined the drive. So this is back to my point again. It's always with the Chiefs. It's not only them doing the one more thing, and the one more thing could be considered a variety of different things, right? It could be considered the Harrison Butker field goal. Like, you still have to nail it. They nail it, right? That's the one more thing. Or the defensive stop that they get immediately after turning the ball over. The Chiefs throw that bad interception. Mahomes brutal throw, turn the ball over. Bengals go immediately 3-and-out. Defense steps up. But the other thing that you have to factor in is the other team's inability to somehow either match what the Chiefs are doing or get that one more step ahead of them. Stepping back is what often happens. And you saw it yesterday. You got a defensive pass interference on the most crucial play of the game, 4th and 16. Literally all you got to do is not what they did. And then you had that the Jamar Chase personal foul, which in my opinion casts a bigger shadow over that game than is going to be talked about. Because we don't know how much more time could have gotten milked off the clock by the Bengals if that didn't happen. We don't know if they can go down and score and separate the game. We'd have no idea. So that was a huge one. How's the internet, by the way? I'm getting this little thing here saying it's not good. This internet that I signed up for, these people, they're getting sick of me. I'm calling them every day. Unbelievable. Absolutely pissing me off to no end. The frustration that this internet company is causing me, you guys have absolutely no idea. I've probably called them 12 times. I'm just going to cancel it today. I'm going to go back to the old one. I've had enough. Let me know in the comments, by the way. It's supposed to be phenomenal. And when it's working great, it is phenomenal. When it's not, though, I mean, you might as well be on dial-up. God, pisses me off. 445 block is asking, if he catches the ball, does the flag get thrown? I don't even know if he could have caught that ball. To be honest, that's the crazy thing. That's why in that situation, you just can't do what the Bengals did. I don't think he even had a chance to catch that ball. It was way over his head. That's why you can't do that shit. But yet it just seems to happen like every time. It's like last week with the Ravens. Lamar Jackson had Rashad Bateman wide open in the back of the end zone, and he misses him. And then when they do end up scoring, you have your foot out of bounds. I don't know if it's divine intervention. I don't know if it's just incompetency for every team on the opposing sideline against the Chiefs. I don't know what it is, but it's something, and it happens all the freaking time. All the damn time. And it results in Chiefs W after Chiefs W. Now, I'll be honest. I know every week you want the Chiefs to lose. I wanted the Chiefs to win that game yesterday. Here's why. Do I think a week 2 loss is going to stunt the playoff push for the Kansas City Chiefs? Do I think a 1-1 start to the year and a loss to the Bengals is going to somehow knock the Chiefs down, in terms of the playoff run? No. And we learned last year, it doesn't matter if they're the 1 seed or the 8 seed. They don't care. They'll win anywhere against anyone until proven otherwise. I want the Bengals losing. The Bills do not match up well with the Bengals. Every time they've played them, it's been awful. I mean, let's just be honest. It's been bad. I know the sample size isn't huge, but the sample size is big enough to where you know what that looks like, and it's not great. The Bills have never played the Bengals well with Joe Burrow and company. The Bills play the Chiefs well every single time they play them. Every time. Might not win it every time. They play them well every time. They match up well. Both those teams match up well. For whatever reason, the Bills do not match up with Cincinnati. I think that Cincinnati could be susceptible to either being way down the playoff totem pole or they could not make it. The health of Joe Burrow is something you got to keep an eye on. We know that he's been favoring that hand. People have been eyeing in on that. Is that something? Jamar Chase seems to be in flux with the organization. He announces yesterday that all of a sudden now he's not pursuing a new contract. T. Higgins isn't playing. I would rather get rid of additional issues that I know. Like if in that moment I can get rid of an additional issue knowing that result being on the other end wouldn't affect the Chiefs at all, I'll take that. I would much rather have the Bengals take another L there. I think because they're more susceptible to fizzling out. To me, a loss yesterday for the Chiefs, I don't know how much it does. Because they're going to be in there regardless. Yeah, I don't know if you can say that about the Bengals right now. For God's sake, they lost to the Patriots week 1. The only thing that makes you a bit iffy on that take is the fact that the Bengals' schedule is really easy because of how poorly they finished last year because of Joe Burrow being injured. I mean, coming up here, they have the Commanders and the Panthers back-to-back. They got the Giants in a couple of weeks. The Raiders, of course. Steelers a couple of times, right? Those should be W's. But when you do look at the games where they play like, Cleveland or Baltimore or Philadelphia, Dallas, the Chargers potentially, I think if you look at that schedule, despite the fact that it is one of the easier schedules for the playoff contending teams in the AFC, I think the Bengals could be susceptible to being on the outside looking in. Or being, if the Bills are, if they're vying for a playoff spot, I think that the edge yesterday goes to the Bills by the Bengals losing. That's all I'm saying. Because you just know, regardless, what's it going to matter to Kansas City? Are they not going to make it? No. So I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. The fact that the Bengals right now are 0-2, alongside of the fact that the Ravens are 0-2, I love it. Makes you realize that there's no taking for granted, like, for instance, that W against the Cardinals. Because so many of these teams right now would have taken for granted the situations that they've had early on in the year here. The Ravens certainly would take advantage, taking for granted the fact that they played the Raiders yesterday in their home opener. Being nearly a double-digit favorite. Took it for granted. Bengals opening up the year with the Patriots. Took it for granted. Every single fan of those teams unequivocally had their team winning that game. Not just the fan base. Every other person in the NFL or around the NFL. Anybody who's a fan of the NFL had them winning those games. The 2-0 start for the Bills. I don't know if everybody had the Bills penciled in at 2-0. I just don't. You saw last week, I mean, nobody was picking the Bills to beat the Dolphins for whatever reason. People don't learn their lesson, but regardless, nobody had a lock on the Bills being 2-0. I think everybody had a lock on at least the Bengals and the Ravens being 1-1. I mean, come on, everybody had a lock on that. And they're both 0-2, and the Bills are 2-0. And I got a couple of my buddies saying, like, you don't want to talk about what are you talking about playoffs already this early for? What does it matter? Dude, it's the NFL. Of course it matters. These games all matter. We're 2 in. We only got 15 more. You're about a seventh of the way done of the year. You can't tell me that these games don't matter. You can't tell me dropping a game to New England and dropping a game to the Raiders isn't going to wind up factoring into the seeding at the end of the year. You can't tell me when you look back on the year, if things go south for the Bengals, if things go south for the Ravens, you can't tell me that everyone's not going to be sitting around saying the year would have been 10 times different if they could have just beaten the freaking Raiders. The year would have been 10 times different if they could have just beaten the freaking Patriots. It's how it goes. In the moment right now, it might not feel like that. It's going to feel like that X amount of months from now when the seeding winds up unfolding the way it does. It's these moments that you're going to wish you had back. Everyone can look back and say, yeah, we had the Chiefs. Like the Bengals could look back and say, yeah, we had the Chiefs on the ropes. Yeah, but it's the Chiefs. I don't think anybody had you guaranteed to win that game. You knew what that game was going to be. It was going to be close. It could go either way. Everybody had you beaten the Patriots. The same can be said for the Ravens. You open up the season week 1, coin toss against the Chiefs. You take it either way, depending on how you predict it. Nobody has you as a coin toss against the Raiders. Everybody has you winning that game. This is why I was so infatuated with the Bills' ability to come into this year and start 2-0. I didn't know if it was going to be a guarantee, but I knew how long of a way it would go in terms of the duration of the season, because that stuff matters to me. Yeah, you're going to drop one every now and then in a situation when you shouldn't. But when you look at the Bills' schedule, losing to the Cardinals, which they could have done, they were on pace to do it for about 30 minutes, losing to the Cardinals, or losing to the Dolphins, which, I never thought they were going to, but plenty of other people did. The majority of people did. Outside of our circle of fans here, the majority of people had the Dolphins winning that game the other day. The difference between being 2-0 going into games against Jacksonville, who I know has been bad, but we know what they do against the Bills. They play them really well. The Ravens, I know it's not been impressive. They're 0-2, but it's still Baltimore. The Texans, they're 2-0. And you know how I feel about Houston if you've been listening for a while. I just think that that's one of the best teams in the league, roster-wise. The Jets, talk about them in a second. Still the Jets, regardless of how the Jets are. Full transparency, I like to keep it 100% when it comes to the honesty about the Bills and the teams around them. Nobody defends the Bills better than the Jets do. Nobody. Nobody has played the Bills better under Josh Allen defensively than the Jets. And we know that for whatever reason, just because it's a divisional game, last year, if you ever needed an example, you got it in week 1. 1-1 going into those games as opposed to being 2-0. It's so different. You can lose to the Ravens and the Texans. We'll just throw that out there. You can lose to the Ravens and the Texans, pick up wins against the Jets and the Jags, and you're 4-2. And I guarantee you, 4-2 going into week 7 is still going to be towards the top of the league. You're going to have your handful of teams. Maybe there'll be 1 or 2 teams max at 6-0. There's going to be a team or 2 at 5-1. And then 4-2 is still going to be towards right at the top of the league. And you got it done in the moments that you should have. You're better than Arizona. You should beat them. You've had the Dolphins number for going on a decade now. You should beat them. And they did. When people write off these crappy losses, I'm like, if that's what makes you feel better, fine. But I can't think like that, because to me, those are the biggest backbreakers. Losing those games you shouldn't. The Ravens had a 10-point lead against the Raiders. You can't tell me that is not going to haunt them at some point. Unless they get the 1 seed, it will haunt them. That's the NFL. The seeding very, very likely is going to come down to a game, or I bet you 2 max. The difference between the 1 seed and the 2 seed, guaranteed, the difference will be a 2-game max. The Ravens were the 1 seed last year. It could be that 10-point blown lead that keeps them from doing it again. The Bengals in their situation, maybe it's that Patriots game that takes them from being the 8 seed getting into the playoffs and not making it. That's why last year, what were you thinking about? What were you thinking about going in to week 18 without a locked up playoff spot? Before the Bills clinched a playoff spot, I believe it got clinched. The Titans, right? The Titans beat somebody. I forget who they beat. But the Titans won the game, and that clinched the Bills' playoff spot before playing Miami. Don't you remember there was a circumstance that could have unfold where if it didn't wind up occurring, the Bills-Dolphins game would be for a playoff spot for the Bills? Remember? If you're like me, all you thought of before the Bills wound up clinching a spot, all you thought of. Jets game week 1, Patriots game middle of the season in Foxborough. It's all you thought about. Why? Because you knew that if the Bills missed the playoffs, it was because of that. You couldn't beat Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. You couldn't beat Mac Jones and the New England Patriots. And when the chips fall where they fall, undeniably, that's going to be what keeps you out of the playoffs. That's all I was thinking until, we had the luxury of getting clinched. So you can't tell me that this stuff doesn't matter. It 100% matters. And that's why it matters so much that the Bills got it done in the first 2 weeks the way that they did. Because you can now afford a slip up against a better team. You can now afford a loss here. You have to factor all these things in. You're not going 17-0. So the more you can mitigate the damage by getting the victories where you should, the far better spot you're going to be in. The Bills coming into the year with all the uncertainty on both sides of the ball, a 2-0 start was certainly not a guarantee. And when you saw the first, 20 minutes of that Cardinals game, did you think the Bills had a 31-10 victory in them against the Dolphins coming up? Did you think they had a 34-point performance in them that day alone? No, there's no way in hell you did. Let's talk about the Jets. They could have lost that game. If Will Levis was not playing probably the worst quarterback in the league right now, or maybe certainly some of it, bottom 3 level quarterback play right now, I think the Titans could have won that game. You could say the same thing about last week, too. You could argue right now, God bless Titans fans. God bless them. You could argue right now, if it weren't for just utter incompetence by their quarterback, the Tennessee Titans could be 2-0 right now. Last week, the Titans had the lead the entire game against the Chicago Bears. The entire game. The Bears did not score an offensive touchdown. Caleb Williams had 93 yards on 29 attempts, and they still won the game. And that's because Will Levis had 2 horrendous turnovers, one late that really killed him. Just killed him. Yesterday, the New York Jets were down 7-0 with 2 minutes left in the first half. Everyone was trying to tell you that the Jets were a quarterback away. Okay, that's fine. Are they going to be better with Aaron Rodgers? I would certainly hope so. I don't think anybody would deny that. But everybody was telling you that the difference between them being on the outside looking into the playoffs to them being on the doorstep of the Super Bowl was a quarterback. You're noticing through 2 weeks, despite the fact that they got the W yesterday, you're noticing through 2 weeks that is just 100% not accurate. I never bought into it, and I never understood what everybody else did. Aaron Rodgers looks his age. Is Aaron Rodgers ball in terms of the release, in terms of the velocity, in terms of the way it looks? Does Aaron Rodgers still throw one of the prettiest balls in the league? Yes. Does Aaron Rodgers to you look like the Aaron Rodgers that you've known for the last 2 decades? Does he look like that to you? No. Yeah, every now and then, every couple, maybe a couple of throws a game, you see the flashes of it. The guy doesn't move anymore. Aaron Rodgers used to be able to move around the pocket with the best of them. You could almost put it up there with I don't want to say Mahomes because Mahomes is Mahomes can really move. But in terms of the elusiveness, the slipperiness, Patrick Mahomes is the slipperiest quarterback I've ever seen. If you know what I mean by that, I mean, it doesn't look fast. It doesn't look all that athletic. And for some reason, you still can't tackle him. That was Aaron Rodgers. Now that you're 40 years old off an Achilles tear, you're noticing the exact same thing you're noticing with Kirk Cousins. You'll see it tonight. It's a three-step drop back. There's no movement. There's no movement to the outside of the pocket on either end. There's no extending the play. There's just no movement. It's snap, throw, snap, throw. And there's a reason why last week they could not do anything offensively. They had one touchdown the entire game before a garbage time touchdown by Tyrod Taylor and company at the end. And then this past week, it was 7-0 with 2 minutes left in the first half. But it's not the offense that's the problem. That's the thing. The offense isn't the solution. That's the main point there. The offense isn't the solution. It was supposed to be the solution to a dominant defense. It was supposed to be the combination of a dominant defense with the addition of a quarterback. Those two elements were supposed to combine into the the Jets being a contender, a juggernaut. But not only even if the Chiefs, I got to stop saying the Jets are the Chiefs. My God, what am I doing? Now I'm starting to sound like Greenberg on ESPN and the rest of them. Even if the Jets had terrific defense right now, I don't think the offense, based on what you've seen, is the factor everybody thought it would be in terms of taking them to the next level. It's average to mediocre offense through 2 weeks. Maybe you wrote it off a bit more than you did yesterday against the Niners because it's the Niners. Then again, however, Sam Darnold, MVP performance yet again yesterday with a team roster-wise that is not nearly as good. The Vikings, in terms of their roster, not nearly as good as the Jets. They win yesterday. Sam Darnold looks terrific yesterday. They put up points in the 20s yesterday. Couldn't do anything, the Jets, offensively. Absolutely nothing against the same exact team 6 days prior. And then yesterday, it's a lot of mediocre again, right? Like I said, they had 0 points almost at the 2-minute warning of the first half. But it's not necessarily the offense to me that's been the most alarming thing. It's just been exactly what I thought it would be. It's just whatever. It's not a difference maker. The difference maker through the first couple of weeks here to me is the defense. The defense does not look like the Jets defense that we've come to know. The Jets defense that everybody's terrified of. They looked abysmal against the 49ers. Absolutely horrendous. The defense on display by the Vikings yesterday was a 10 times better performance than anything the Jets did against the same exact team a week before. The Vikings dominated the San Francisco 49ers yesterday defensively. The Jets, their whole MO is supposed to be built around that. It wasn't even a shadow of that. They got dominated. I mean, the Niners walked all over the Jets in week 1. And then yesterday, you're playing Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans, and it just felt like the defense could never put the game away. And if it weren't for Will Levis throwing a backwards pass, they would have been up 2 scores early on in the ballgame. To me, the biggest difference in that game yesterday was the fact that Will Levis, they're up 7-0 in the second quarter. Will Levis on the 10-yard line, the Jets' 10-yard line, throws a backwards lateral on third down. Fumble, Jets ball. If they would have scored on that play, it could have been all the difference. And then later on in the game, he throws another pick. It unraveled. They do get the win yesterday, 24-17, but it was beyond unimpressive. And right now, I just think the Jets look as mediocre as they ever have. I know a win's a win, but a 24-17 victory against the Tennessee Titans, where you got gifted a backwards lateral on your own 10-yard line that saved you from going down double digits early on in the game to Will Levis. The fact that you were scoreless 2 minutes before the end of the half, nothing about that impressed me at all. If you watched the Titans-Jets game yesterday, those two teams looked far more on an even playing field than the Jets being so much superior than the Titans. So early on here, basically to put a bow on it, as we kind of just rambled on about what we saw yesterday in week 2, to put a bow on it, the start to this year has been pretty crazy. And here's how it ultimately looks through these first 2 weeks. Right now, you have in the AFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2-0 teams. Buffalo Bills, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have 1 touchdown, the Houston Texans, the Chargers, and the Chiefs. Those are your remaining undefeated teams in the AFC. On the opposite end of that, the Jaguars 0-2, the Bengals 0-2, the Ravens 0-2, Miami 1-1, Jets 1-1, Patriots the same record as both of them. And I'll be honest, the Patriots to me have looked more competitive through the first 2 weeks than both the Jets and the Dolphins. That's just a fact. The Patriots have looked far more competitive through I know it's just 2 weeks of football. The only sample size we have of the year, however. Through the first 2 weeks of the 2024 season, the New England Patriots look far more competitive than both the Jets and the Dolphins. All 3 of them are 1-1. 5 remaining undefeated teams in the AFC: Chiefs, Chargers, Texans, Steelers, Bills. And then in the NFC, the Eagles will look to make it 2-0 tonight and add to the list. But the Vikings, I mean, no one saw that. The Saints, no one saw that. The Bucs, and then the Seahawks. That's why the fact that the Bills 2-0, you can't take it for granted. You can't take it for granted because I think all of these other teams would have predicted a 2-0 start for themselves, and you're seeing there ain't a whole lot left already through 2 weeks. I mean, the list right now in the AFC is thin, and one of the 5 teams in the AFC with an undefeated record is a team that has 1 touchdown on the year. So, ain't as easy as it looks on paper sometimes. And you could argue through the first 2 weeks, the Bills had a tougher schedule than both the Ravens and the Bengals. You saw what the Cardinals did on Sunday. When you factor that in with the Miami Dolphins, I think that that 2-game stretch is probably more difficult than Chiefs Raiders, because I think the Cardinals are better than the Raiders, and Patriots Chiefs. I know the Chiefs aspect of things is far tougher, obviously, but I think the other opponent is weaker than Arizona. Maybe it balances out a bit, but regardless, those 2 teams are 0-2. The Bills are 2-0. Even if it balances out a bit, to me, it's still an even playing field in terms of competition. And that's how different your season can swing within a 2-game stretch early on in the year. And as 445 Block is saying, whole lot of football left. Absolutely. But the way things have started, you'd much rather be on our end of things than on the Ravens end of things, the Bengals end of things, etc. Makes it way tougher, especially with the schedule at hand. That's the huge factor here. With the schedule at hand for these Buffalo Bills, the way that they've started and the way that they've looked in that 2-0 stint, you couldn't be more stoked. And now you have an 11-day rest advantage, not advantage, but an 11-day rest going in to Monday Night Football at your place against a team in the Jacksonville Jaguars who have lost 7 of their last 8 and have scored 13 points and 17 points in back-to-back weeks with very below mediocre quarterback play and pretty much non-existent offense. You got to like the way things are stacking up right now for the Buffalo Bills and their chances to go 3-0. Signified coming in, backwards lateral while tripping over his own lineman in the red zone. It was unbelievable. It was brutal. It was brutal. And I really do think that could have been a major difference in the ballgame. They would have gotten at least a field goal there, and they would have put them up 10-0 at the minimum. Jets offense had nothing going on. That could have been a major difference in the entire ball game, and you'll never know what could have occurred. You understand, hey, you throw a wide receiver catches the ball over the middle, gets nailed, fumbles. Like last week, Travis Etienne, great run, beautiful play by Miami to knock that ball on the goal line. Shit happens. Great play. You can't put that on the same playing field when Will Levis willingly throws the ball backwards on third down for no reason. Big difference between making a great defensive play and forcing a turnover and that. And I think that swung things in a whole other direction than it could have been if they would have just either taken the field goal or maybe gotten in the end zone, whatever. Brutal. Real quick before we close up shop, wanted to go back out and show you once again the line for Monday night. There it is right now on BetUS. Buffalo Bills, 5.5-point favorite at home a week from tonight against the Jacksonville Jaguars. To give you a perspective, in the same setting, this is essentially the exact same spread that the Bills had over the Arizona Cardinals. That's the disrespect currently that Jacksonville is getting, and I think it's deserving right now. Through the first 2 weeks, Arizona looks like the far superior team to Jacksonville. Bills were a 6-point favorite in that game at home. They're now a 5.5-point favorite at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars right now on BetUS. So that just goes to show you what the outlook is right now on both those teams. Bills trending up, Jaguars trending way down. I could see this line moving up even further. I could see this getting up to 6 or higher. So if you want to get in on it before it does, 150% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits using the promo code YouTube150. Also, if you haven't heard from Rico and I, you really got to take advantage of the app that we've partnered up with this season because I love this app, the Autograph app. It is the coolest. It's got everything all in one spot. The link's right down in the description. All you got to do is click on it, and it'll take you to the App Store, and you just download it completely free. And it's kind of like Reddit, Twitter, and a variety of your favorite sports apps all in one. And it just condenses all your favorite Bill stuff into one thread. So the YouTube, podcasts, Twitter, and blogs all in one spot. So you get all of the info. You can watch our shows right on there. You can listen to our podcast right on there. And while you're doing it, you can read up on all of the top Bills tweets and top Bills articles. I love it for like right after the game the other day on Friday. You just hop on there and all the top stuff from the Dolphins games right there. You can listen to a podcast or a show while you're doing it. And on top of that, it gives you free rewards, which is super cool because you just use the app, doing what you're doing right now, watching me or listening to the show on podcast form or reading up on some articles. You get points for that. They accumulate. Then you can use them for tickets and jerseys and stuff. Really cool app, really cool idea. And you definitely should be using it throughout the year because you're already consuming the content. Might as well get rewarded for it. Autograph app, link in the description below. All right, I got to run. I actually have to go get my marriage license right now, and I'm running late. Caroline's going to kill me, but the wedding, folks, it's 11 days from today, which is absolutely nuts, and we have to go and get the license today. And I just realized what time it is, and I'm running late. So I got to bounce and go and do that. But I appreciate you tuning in on a Monday morning, recapping a wild week 2, where we took a look around the league at all that occurred and stacked it up with what the Bills got going on. Look, to summarize it, do I think the Bills right now are the best team in the league? Time will tell. I don't think you can make that a definitive statement, of course. When you're talking about everything considered, no, they're not. But I think through the first 2 weeks, the better way to put it, I think through the first 2 weeks, the Bills are playing some of the best football in the league. Some of the best defensive football and offensive football consistent through 2 weeks. I think that that's more than just about anybody can say. Outside of teams you would have never expected, like the Vikings and the Saints and the Patriots, based on the teams you had expectations for, who's played better consistent football through the first 2 weeks than the Buffalo Bills? You just have to hope it continues. They get their opportunity a week from tonight, and I can't wait. We got a lot more stuff coming for you all throughout the week. Rico is tomorrow, and I'm going to try and get on here again a little bit later in the week, get a Jaguars rep on here, talk to them about what's going on with Jacksonville and preview the game with them. That's the plan. So we'll be on here throughout the rest of the week as well, and looking forward to seeing you when we are. On your way out, like and subscribe if you could. BetUS YouTube 150 is the promo code for 150% bonus, up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits. All right. Enjoy your Monday, folks. Enjoy your the rest of your week. It's a long wait, it feels like, to the next Bills game, but at least we're riding 2-0 into it. All right, folks. Talk to you on the next one. Much love. Thanks again for tuning in. And as always,